Hello. Hello, everyone.
Thanks for joining us today to learn about the Anthos developer experience using Cloud Code. I'm Russell Wolf, the product manager for Cloud Code.
And I'm David Gageot. I'm a software engineer on Cloud Code.
Once this session is over, we'd love to get your feedback, so please go to the Next 19 app and leave the feedback when the session is over. Now let's get to it.
OK, before we get started and talk about developer experience and IDE extensions, let's do a quick recap about what Antos is, so that everyone is on the same page. OK? So Antos is a platform to modernize applications. It enables you to build and manage modern applications, and it gives you the freedom to choose where to run them. Antos gives you a consistent experience in both on-premises and on cloud. You know, in IT, we are commonly facing three big trade-offs that keep us from giving the business what it wants. We have to choose between security and agility. We have to choose between reliability and cost. And we have to choose between portability and consistency. But with Antos, it's a different kind of hybrid cloud software that overcomes some of those trade-offs. With Antos, you can manage your applications across on-premise and cloud providers without lock-in. And you can build application once that you can run anywhere. You know, this is what Antos is made of. At its core, it's powered by open source software such as Kubernetes, Istio, and Knative that ensures portability and interoperability. But this is a custom, configured, battle-tested for enterprises and managed fully by Google. So it's also deeply integrated with GCP platform services to deliver the benefits of Google Cloud on-premise. The integration enables a wide variety of solutions across serverless, CI/CD, machine learning, and many more. But we're not here to talk about all of those services and all of those products. We're here to talk about developer experience. So we're going to deep dive onto three main topics that are of interest for developers. We're going to talk about developing applications for Kubernetes. How is that different, and how can Google help developers get started, be focused, and be productive when they develop applications for Kubernetes? The second topic we're going to talk about is how to handle config management. It's very hard to maintain consistency across multiple clusters, and we can take a look at how developers would handle such case. They would have declarative APIs to do that, so we're going to talk about that. And the last topic we're going to talk about is service management. Developers will run the applications in the wider GCP ecosystem, and Antos has the tools to provision such GCP services in a developer-friendly manner. So we're going to talk about those three subjects. So Russell, do you want to talk about how it's like to develop applications for Kubernetes?
Yeah, so how many developers do we have here in the room today? Go ahead and raise your hand.
Yeah, quite a lot.
Yeah,
cool.
A lot. So how many of you are currently deploying to Kubernetes? Not as many, but still a good bit. So for those people, what is it like to actually develop for Kubernetes and deploy on it? Do you like it? You can shout it out. So
not a lot of people like it.
Yeah, I saw a few people thumbs up, not many. I saw some it's okays. But I'll say the most common word we've heard describe Kubernetes development is frustrating. We've consistently heard from customers that while there are many benefits to Kubernetes, it can be a challenging shift for application developers. Whether it's authoring YAML, setting up debugging on your Kubernetes cluster when you're used to just debugging against something locally, or just any of the other things that keep you from being able to focus on your code, people are struggling with Kubernetes. So who wants to spend more time on their code? OK, I think that's everyone. People just aren't raising their hands at this point. Yeah. So there are three main areas of frustration that we hear about Kubernetes. First is that it takes developers a while just to get a basic app up and running. There are several conceptual shifts that you have to deal with, and those include containerization and Kubernetes config. Second, understanding the relationship between all of the moving parts of Kubernetes, especially all of the new resources that are going on there. What are the various microservices and clusters and pods that you're now dealing with? And then finally, it's just more difficult to debug and view logs. You know why? It's on a remote container that's hosted in the cloud instead of just being on your local machine running where you're used to doing your development. That's why we're excited to share Cloud Code with all of you. Cloud Code lets you spend less time worrying about all of that config and setup and the tool chain, and more time actually focusing on authoring the code. Cloud Code has been downloaded hundreds of thousands of times by developers, and we're excited to announce that Cloud Code is now generally available. We know that developers are most productive when they're working in their favorite IDEs. By embracing developers' existing workflows, Cloud Code makes working with Kubernetes feel like you are actually working with a local app, like you're used to. It also preserves the investments that you've made. You've probably configured a lot of tools, you have processes that you work on when you're developing your code locally. You don't have to sacrifice those when you're using your same IDE, and Cloud Code just plugs into it. So Cloud Code dramatically simplifies the creation and maintenance of your Kubernetes applications. Getting started is streamlined with samples, config generation, and snippets that we provide to make it easy to deal with those Kubernetes YAML files. When you're ready to deploy locally, Cloud Code supports both Minikube and Docker for desktop. Deploying to a remote cluster is just as easy. You can easily choose something on Google Cloud, on-prem, or anywhere. Cloud Code works with any Kubernetes cluster. And finally, Cloud Code makes your logs easily accessible from the IDE. And it also enables interactive debugging on your code, even though it's hosted on a cluster in the cloud. So Cloud Code is available for free for Visual Studio Code and JetBrains IDEs like Golang and Intellij. You can get it from the respective plugin marketplaces. We have public issue trackers on GitHub, and we'd love to hear if you have any feedback if you try it out after this presentation today. Now, let's get on to the fun stuff. I'm going to show you how to get started with Cloud Code.
Demo time.
Is it switched over?
I guess it is.
OK. So here we're looking at VS Code. I've already installed the Cloud Code extension, and we can see that because we now have a Cloud Code contribution in the side here. I can use the command palette and type new, and we can see that Cloud Code has this contribution for new applications. I'll select that, and I can go ahead and create a Node.js Hello World application. However, you can see that we have sample applications available across many languages like Python, Node, Java, and Go. We also have basic sample applications like a Hello World, as well as a guestbook application, which has multiple microservices. So now that we've confirmed the file path, Cloud Code is now cloning this sample, and it's loaded it up in VS Code for us. As I mentioned before, we have all of our source files here for this application. We also have a Docker file here, which defines how we're actually going to containerize this application. And finally, we have all of these Kubernetes manifests. We have our deployment and our service YAML files. Let's go ahead and take a look at one of these. One of the cool things that Cloud Code does for us is provide Kubernetes YAML authoring assistance. Here we can see in the service.yaml file that if I were to go and delete this load balancer, if I wanted to enter in a type here, I could just use control space, and Cloud Code is now providing these suggestions for all of the different valid types I could put in there. So let's throw a load balancer back in there. You can also see that if I look at this port number, for example, and let's say there was an A there, Cloud Code also provides this validation and linting that tells us when you have something wrong in that file. You're not just dealing with plain text anymore. You actually get the features you're used to when you're coding, like completions and linting. Also, if you hover over these types, you can see that we have inline documentation for all of the different YAML types. Again, just making it easier for you to figure out this config. Now that we've seen that, let's go ahead and get this application deployed. Cloud Code makes that really easy too. We can just go to the Cloud Code section of the command bar, and it shows a few of these core commands. These are also all available in the command palette. And I can select Deploy Application. I'll just use a default scaffold profile that Cloud Code generated for me. That defines how we're going to deploy to Kubernetes and does it really efficiently. Let's choose to deploy to my Docker for Desktop cluster, although I could choose any cluster that I have here. Cloud Code makes it really easy to select whichever one. And we can see that it's gone ahead and started the build and deploy process. And wow, it's already completed. I can go ahead and click on this, and we can see that it's deployed the application correctly.
Yeah. So you deployed in just one button. The images were built, tagged, deployed, and you get the URL to connect to. That's cool. But can you show us what's actually deployed on my cluster?
Yeah, that's another really cool thing that Cloud Code offers. If we click into the Cloud Code tab, you can see that we have this Kubernetes Explorer here. I can expand this Docker desktop cluster that we created, and you can actually see more information about all of the resources that are inside the cluster. So you can see the deployments, the pods, the various services that you have, and you can drill down into them. For now, let's go ahead and open up this pod that we've deployed onto. I'm going to go ahead and try checking out the logs. We visited the site. It should have generated some logs. So I can just click on here, and we have this log viewer built in here. And you can see here that we've already gotten a log. This log viewer makes it really easy to actually view our logs inside the IDE, though. It doesn't just put them in here as plain text in the terminal like you usually get with VS Code. It gives you these great filters to go between your different deployments and pods, namespaces, and containers. It also has it in a schematized and searchable format. So if you're really trying to figure out what went wrong, you can easily search on it here and get to those logs quickly. Another thing that you can do here that's really cool is we can go directly into this pod. Now, regardless of whether that cluster is deployed on Minikube or Docker for Desktop or somewhere on-prem or in the cloud, it's really easy just to right-click and get terminal. And you can see here from the terminal inside of VS Code, I'm now in a remote terminal session with that pod inside of that cluster. So I can go ahead and do ps.x, and I can see all of the processes that are actually running inside of that pod at this time, making it really easy to debug and figure out what's actually going on.
That's awesome. I mean, I don't know about you, but I do prefer to use the CLI. But I know a lot of people do prefer the UI. And I think that Cloud Code gives you all the power of the CLI with a very simple UI. So you want to see the logs, you want to connect to your pods, you want to see what's deployed, and it's very, very easy with just a few clicks. Thank you, Russell. I think we should go back to the slides. So we've seen so far that Cloud Code makes you very productive with Kubernetes YAML. You get code completion, you got validation, you got code templates that we didn't show, by the way. You're not afraid of making changes, and you can stay very focused on your task. You don't have to open the documentation on the side. You've got the documentation embedded into the YAML. But Cloud Code comes with additional authoring assistance for the Antos tooling. A good example of such tool is Migrate for Antos. I don't know if you've heard about Migrate for Antos. Who's heard about it? Maybe during the keynote? Yeah. So we're going to talk about it very briefly. It's not really a tool that developers are going to use, but the way we're going to use it, it's quite interesting. So Migrate for Antos is an awesome solution for application modernization. It takes your VMs, such as VMware VMs, and it automatically converts them into containers running on GKE. So basically, you take a VM with a multi-tier web application, very complicated legacy application, and it's running inside a VM, and you can move it to a GKE cluster very easily. And you're then free to develop more greenfield components that will connect to such application. So how do I use migrate for Anthos? Remember, in the Kubernetes world, everything is about declarative APIs and YAML files. So YAML is king. So migrating a VM begins with getting its IDE and then author a YAML description of the migration. And using migrate for Anthos is clearly not a developer everyday task, so we're not going to show the whole migration. I'm just going to show you how you would write such YAML to describe a migration. Cloud Code makes that very easy, and you can do it directly from your IDE. So can we switch to demo, please? So I'm going to close that, and I'm going to go there. Here, it's a typical empty migration project where I only have empty YAML files, and I'm like, what should I do? Should I open the documentation? What YAML should I write? And in fact, with Cloud Code, it's quite easy to get some assistance here. So I'm just going to hit Control Space, and I'm going to type migrate, and I have a few YAML templates that I might want to use to get started. And I remember in the documentation, it says that I need to create a volume, a persistent volume claim. So I'm going to choose that, and I'm guided across all the fields so that I can create I can enter the right settings. All the time, I've got tooltips to help me. If I don't understand a field, I just hover on it, and I've got some interesting documentation. And also, for some of the fields, of course, I've got completion, and I can choose between fully cached or streaming. I don't remember maybe what it is, and I have the details here. So I'm going to leave it like that, and I'm going to save that. And then I heard that I need to create some state for my migration. So again, I'm going to use, templated YAML, and it's going to help me create very complicated YAML just by entering the name of my application and then going through all the fields and making sure that everything is OK. So I'm going to, there's a PVC, I can here select the version of the migrate. So it's GA today, so it's 1.0, OK? So basically, that's all I have to do. All I have to do is create those two YAML files and send them to Kubernetes. And if I have installed migrate for Anthos beforehand, it's going to do the migration for me. So you see, with Cloud Code, it's very easy to create such YAML files. So I'm not saying that it's the only thing that you need. It's just that when you know what you have to do, and you've got some rough documentation, you can achieve your goal very quickly with all the authoring features. OK? That's about it for, can we go back to the slide, please? OK. So migrating application easier with Cloud Code. There's another problem that we talked about when we talked about Kubernetes. You're going to end up having lots of clusters, many clusters. And configuring those Kubernetes clusters can be hard. And if you have multiple clusters and you have to ensure some consistency across all those clusters, it's even harder. You have to manage users, ACLs, you have to create namespaces, maybe the same namespaces on all your clusters. You have to create quotas, extensions. Let's say you want to install Knative or Istio on all your clusters. How do you make sure that you have the same version installed everywhere? At Google, we believe that this should be done with a declarative, bulletproof manner, using the very same YAML file format that Kubernetes is using to deploy applications. Enters Antos config management, a single pane of glass for managing configuration and policies. It works on Google Cloud, on-prem, and on other clouds. The idea is that you're going to use a central Git repository where you're going to store all your YAML, and an agent will look at this YAML every second and will identify the changes that needs to be applied on all your clusters. Maybe it needs to create a new cluster, or maybe it needs to create the missing namespaces on your clusters. Everything can be done in a declarative manner. So you can provision namespaces. You can, for example, ensure that there is a policy on all your clusters. For example, you might want to enforce users to put labels on their workloads so that usage tracking works and so that monitoring works. Or you want to make sure that every workload has limits and quotas, and you want to reject all the workloads that don't have such limits. So as I said, it's hybrid, so it works locally, on cloud, on Google Cloud. It's really Kubernetes native because you're going to do that with just YAML files. And Cloud Code makes that very easy thanks to its YAML authoring capabilities. Can we go back to the demo? Again, I'm not going to show you all the details, just to show you that with Cloud Code, you can configure your cluster very easily. So I'm going to open another folder. I followed the Getting Started guides for Antos config management, and I created a Git repo for my clusters. So here you can see everything is going to be driven by YAML files and folders. And for example, I can pre-create namespaces for all my clusters. Here, for example, I've got a noded namespace that's declared, and you can see that there's a standard YAML files to describe that namespace. I can create users, role bindings, etc. Everything can be done with the standard YAML syntax, and I put them in this Git repo, and when I commit it, it's applied on all my clusters. But let's say I want to create a cluster. I've got to do it in this cluster registry folder. This is the way I'm supposed to work. So here I created a prod cluster YAML, but again, I have the empty page syndrome. I don't know what to type. So I can use Cloud Code and just create a cluster. And it's going to help me put a name to my cluster. So it's going to be the prod cluster. And I can set labels. And I'm sure that this cluster will always have those labels applied. If someone connects to the console and changes the labels, config management will make sure those labels are fixed and repaired, and it's going to be OK. OK? Another thing that I might want to do with config management is, of course, to configure, to tell config manager where is the Git repo, the central Git repo that I need to use. So I'm going to do that by creating a config management.yaml. And again, I'm going to use pre-canned templates. OK, so my cluster is called Next19, and it's going to be where to find my repo, etc. So you've seen, this is not easy, but it's easier. OK? I'm not telling you that you're going to discover easily what those products are doing, but once you understand that everything is YAML-based, you can use your Cloud Code IDE, and you can start adding some more configuration to all your clusters. This is quite useful. Can we go back to the slides, please? The last product that I want to talk about that's going to help you manage your clusters and applications, it's Config Connector. Who's heard about Config Connector? No one? Yeah, cool. I'm going to talk about it. The idea is that at some point, your application, Kubernetes application, is going to connect to the wider GCP ecosystem. You're going to want to provision a database, or PubSub topic, or maybe BigQuery. And you could go to the console or use the CLI to instantiate such service. But in fact, it would be much better if you could describe that into YAML files and put those YAML files in the config manager Git repo, and then something in the backend will ensure that those services are instantiated, configured, and that your application can connect to them. So this is where Config Connector enters. It's really something that you can use to provision any service on the Google Cloud Platform, and you do it with standard YAML. Again, you would push those configurations to a Git repo, and the operator will automatically fetch those changes and automatically instantiate the services for you. So what's really cool is that first, it's going to be easy to do that with Cloud Code. Second, you don't have to learn additional tools. There's quite a lot of tools that you could learn to instantiate those services, but in fact, since you've invested into Kubernetes and into the YAML API, declarative API, it's really good that you can instantiate those services with the same API. So quick demo. I'm just going to configure a Redis database and a Spanner database. I'm not going to do it like fully, just show you the YAML config. So I'm going to do that somewhere. I don't remember where. Yeah, dev. Here I've got a dev namespace, and I'm going to configure a Redis database. Again, just YAML. I think you got the point, right? I'm just going to show you, but basically, you get to choose the name for your Redis instance. You can tweak all the settings, like the size of the memory, the region where it's going to run. And when you save this folder and commit it to your Git repo, a Redis database will be created for you. Which is quite nice is that if you delete the Redis database, it's going to be recreated for you so that your Kubernetes application can just connect to it.
So I guess this means that you get version control now for all of your policies, for all of your resources. You can roll back if you do something.
Exactly. It's really a GitOps approach where you put everything into declarative YAML API, you put that in the central Git repo, and boom, everything is managed. And as you said, you can really roll back very easily. Same for a Spanner database. Spanner database, just a few lines of YAML. Can we go back to the slides, please? OK, we've seen a lot of YAML, right? Maybe too much. What we wanted to show you is that it's very easy to author such YAML. And basically, what you want to do is spend more time on your code, so you're going to spend less time on the YAML. So we're going to see how Cloud Code makes that super easy for you to spend more time on your code. Do you want to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So another demo. For this one, I'm going to use Intellij. So we showed that Cloud Code can run in VS Code, but it can also run in any JetBrains IDE. And this is Intellij. So I'm going to open a more complicated project. So the first thing that you see here when you open the project in Intellij is that Cloud Code triggers and say, hey, maybe I should help you create Cloud Code Kubernetes run configuration. So I'm just going to click on that button, and here I'm going to see two run configurations that are going to be helpful for me to deploy my application. But before I do that, I'm just going to guide you through the application. It's a small web application that's composed of 6 microservices. Okay? Some of those microservices are written in Go, some of them in Java, and I've got some Node.js for the front end. And I've got also a Postgres database. Each of those services, they are in one different folder. In each folder, there's a Docker file, and I've got all my YAML files here to explain Kubernetes, what I want to deploy. Okay? So it's a more complicated application. The thing that's quite nice is that I'm going to be able to deploy it with only one click. What should I do if I didn't have Cloud Code? I would have to build 6 Docker images. I would have to tag 6 of them too. I would have to take the tags and put them in the Kubernetes YAML files, and then I would have to send the YAML files to Kubernetes. With Cloud Code on Intellij, I just have to click on this button here, and it's going to do that automatically for me. If you take a look at the logs, it's going to create 6 images, tag them, patch the YAML, send it to Kubernetes, and what's quite nice is that it's going to show me the logs for all those components with just one click. Who likes that? Who wants to try Cloud Code on Monday? Yeah, a few people. OK, so I'm going to show you the application. So it's just a basic a small game where you have to recognize the Cloud Code product. I never remember. I think this is tracing. Yeah. What's quite nice is that here in my IDE, I can see the logs of all the components so that I really know what I'm doing when I'm using the application. OK? But I don't really like the title here. I want to change it. And I've got a silly microservice written in Java that serves this title. It's just dedicated to serving that title. OK?
So if you go to debug it, what does it actually mean for you to go in and debug a Java application like that?
So if I want to debug a Java application like this, it is quite complicated because, you see, this application is running inside a container. So first, I need to connect to that remote container that runs somewhere on the pod, somewhere on a remote machine. And it is quite complicated. But also, maybe I need to run the application with different arguments so that it can be debugged. So most of the time, people, they do have one Docker file for production and one Docker file for development. And it's really a mess, because then you're out of sync, and you need to maintain those two files. It's really a mess. Before I show you debug, I'm just going to show you that I started my application with develop on Kubernetes. And develop on Kubernetes is not only about deploying that application once, it's also about updating that application each time I make a change to the application. So I'm going to show you that. I'm going to change a little bit, OK, some Java code here. So yeah, this is a Vertex application that's just serving this word here, that's here, OK? Not super crazy. I'm going to add some more Z's. I'm going to save, and when I save it, what Cloud Code has done is it has detected the change, it has rebuilt the Java microservice, it has redeployed it, and it should already be deployed here. See? So I can do that again. You see that it's very quick. I can just change the code and refresh. Yep. Refresh. Boom. It's updated. OK? So you can really focus on your code, and it's going to update in the background. I think this is pretty nice, right? Mm-hmm. And it can be better than that. I mean, this is a Java application. I rebuilt the whole Java application on each change. But for some applications like Node.js, maybe I don't need to rebuild the application fully. I could do something better. I'm going to show you that. I'm going to edit some static HTML file here. So this is where the index contains the title, and I want to add some more question marks, exclamation marks, sorry. I can just save, and boom, it's deployed. So what happened? Cloud Code has detected that I changed the file on my machine, and because it's configured to do so, it just synced that file from my machine to the remote container running somewhere on one cluster, and it works locally on Docker Desktop or Minikube or on any remote cluster. I can do that again, just to see that it's quite quick. See? I change, and boom, it's deployed. So this is where really we promised you that Cloud Code could make you focus more on your code and not on the YAML or Kubernetes or the complexity. Really, this is what we meant. So Russel talked about debug, and as we said, debugging is very complicated until you have Cloud Code. So I'm going to run the whole application in debug mode. Just a different button, OK? And I'm going to refresh it. OK? So this is my application. If I want to understand what's going on in my code, I should be able to put a breakpoint in my code. But as we said, it's quite complicated. But not with Cloud Code. With Cloud Code, I can just open the sources and put a breakpoint here. And when I refresh, boom, I can see all the variables. So try to do that on Monday without Cloud Code. You're going to see that it can prove to be very complicated. And you have to learn how to do it for all the languages. With Cloud Code, we try to recognize the language. And here we recognize that it was Java, and we reconfigured the application to be debuggable. And I can, for example, switch back to simple quiz. And I can maybe remove the breakpoint and carry on. And what would be nice if I rebuild, if I recompile just that Java file, it would be nice if it was synced with the remote container. Is it? Yeah, it is. So really, I can debug my application, and I don't think about the complexity. I just do it, like if it was a local application. So I think this is pretty awesome, right?
Yeah.
OK, there's one more thing I wanted to show you. We talked about how easy it is to deploy your applications on a local, like Docker desktop or Minikube cluster, but it also works with remote clusters. Actually, it works with GKE, it works on-prem, it works with any cloud provider, it works with any Kubernetes cluster. You can use the same tools and the same config to deploy the exact same application to a different cluster. I'm going to show you how to do that. First, I'm going to stop my application, and I'm going to edit my configurations here. I'm going to edit the configuration, develop. So you can see here that develop on Kubernetes is going to automatically rebuild and rerun on source and configuration changes. And I can switch. I can either use the current system, the current cluster that my system is connected to, or I can switch to a different cluster. Here, I'm going to switch to a GKE cluster running in Europe. OK? And since my images will be deployed on a remote cluster, they need to be pushed to a registry, right? So I'm just going to set the name of the registry that should be used. I'm going to use the GCRIO next 19. OK? I'm going to apply that, and I'm going to rerun the exact same application. This time, if you take a look, you can see that the images are pushed to a remote registry. The UI that I changed in front of you needs to be rebuilt and needs to be repushed, but all the other images, they were already pushed, and Scaffold and Cloud Code know that. So it just shows me the application running on a remote cluster. And by the way, you might not believe me because you see localhost here. You talked about a remote cluster, but you're connecting to localhost. In fact, Cloud Code is setting up some port forwarding so that you connect to localhost, but in fact, you're talking to your remote cluster. So basically, you're deploying an application on a remote cluster. You don't have to remember the name of the cluster, the IP address, the external IP. You don't have to remember anything. You just focus on your code. And just to show you, the sync feature also works with remote clusters. If I change some static HTML and save, boom, it's going to be deployed. Here we're talking about a cluster running in Belgium, OK? And I just changed the code, and boom, it was automatically synced. Awesome, right? Who wants to try that? Yeah, a few people. Cool. Can we go back to the slides? So what we showed you is what we call the tight inner developer loop. As a developer, you want to spend more time on your code, and this is what we created Cloud Code for. OK, let's sum things up. Do you want to do that, Russel?
Yeah. So at the beginning, I showed you how easy it was to get started with Kubernetes using Cloud Code. We got started by creating a new Node.js Hello World application. We looked at how we could modify its YAML and how we provided YAML authoring assistance for that application. We deployed it to Docker for desktop locally. And then we looked at the layout of the resources that got generated in that cluster with the Kubernetes Cluster Explorer. After that, David showed how you could use YAML authoring assistance inside of Cloud Code to work with a variety of different Anthos services, such as migrate for Anthos to move your VMs over to Kubernetes, Kubernetes config connector to define your GCP resources as code, and finally, Anthos config management to define your policy as code. And again, the big benefits you get by moving all this stuff to code is that you now have a tracked in version control, and you can easily roll it back if something goes wrong. Finally, David showed you that tight feedback loop you get with Cloud Code, how you really get a much better inner developer loop. So when you make a change, you get feedback on it right away, and you don't need to spend minutes figuring out how to get that change deployed into your local or whatever cluster, just to make the next change, to build the feature, to fix the bug, or to refactor the code that you're currently working on. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We really appreciate you joining us for the session. We'll be around here for questions right now if anyone wants to ask any. And I do have one more quick reminder, which is that your feedback is greatly appreciated. So after the session, please check out the next UK app and leave some feedback.
OK, thanks for the demo. It's really, really interesting, powerful. I was wondering how it will help me to manage the differences between different clouds. For example, if I want to make a deployment on Amazon and Google, and do I still have to maintain two different sets of the YAML files?
No, clearly, you don't have to make any changes to your YAML files. This is the promise of Kubernetes. Once you have Kubernetes installed on each of your clusters, whether it's on-prem or any cloud, the same set of YAML files and the same set of containers will run on any cluster. Of course, you might have different backends, like managed services on each cloud, but for your new applications, it really runs on any cloud. And if you use Migrate for Antos, you can take any VM and use it as a backend and run it on any cloud provider too, with the same config.
Let me try to clarify my question a little bit. Because when you interact with like storage and network architecture, these different clouds are essentially very different.
Yeah, the clouds are different, but most of the time when you install Kubernetes, there is some abstraction around volumes and storage and networking. So basically, once you've installed Kubernetes, you don't really have to think about those differences. There's really some abstraction.
In my life, I do have to.
Sorry?
In my life, I do have to. I'm struggling with that.
OK.
I was wondering, yeah.
So maybe you can come to us afterwards, and we can go into the details, because that's interesting.
Yeah, in the computing aspect, yes, Kubernetes masks all the differences. But for the network and the storage, there's always a difference when you interact with that.
OK.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi there. Yeah. So I had a couple of questions. First one, you deployed the database as well. Did it use any sort of a volume claims, or was it just a?
For my demo, I deployed the database. No, it's a Postgres database that basically has all the data inside a SQL file. So it's just for the demo, this one. In real life, I would connect to a managed database, maybe instantiated with using Cloud Connector.
Second question was, can you share the link for the source code if you could look at it?
Yeah, we're gonna share that.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi. Can this integrate with any CI, like with Jenkins? I mean, on ground level, you don't push the code directly onto the pre-production or some environment. For development, yes, but in real scenario, you have to look at what is your pipeline looks like. So can this integrate within CI too?
Yeah, so Cloud Code offers the set of IDE plugins for developers to use directly for Intellij, JetBrains IDEs, and VS Code. But powering Cloud Code is another project that our team works on called Scaffold. And so Scaffold, S-K-A-F-F, sorry.
S-K-A-F-F-O-L-D.
Sorry, my throat. Would you mind?
Yeah, no, so I think, so first, clearly, what we showed with the sync and auto-deploy is just for development. If you want to deploy to pre-prod or prod, don't use that. It's like patching PHP in production, right? So what you showed during the keynote is you could use Cloud Build to do that, or you could also use any product like Travis CI or Jenkins, and you could use the same scaffold configuration. I don't know if you're looking at the slides or the demo. Can we switch to my laptop? So here inside my project, I've got a file called scaffold.yaml. This is where all my artifacts are configured, and this is where I'm saying, this is the proxy is here, the database is here, And this is where I can tell the list of the YAML files that need to be deployed. And if I use the scaffold CLI, I can run the same deployment that I've run in front of you on my CI/CD. It's going to build the images, it's going to deploy them.
And so this scaffold YAML file gets automatically generated for you also. So if you go in Cloud Code and you start your project and you want to deploy it to Kubernetes, we generate the scaffold.yaml for you. You go and check that project into source control. You have that scaffold.yaml there. You then go on a set up your CI/CD pipeline. You tell Cloud Build to use Scaffold to do one of those deployments as part of one of its build steps. And the exact same benefits you get from Cloud Code locally with these deployments. It deploys the exact same way when you go to deploy to prod or whatever other cluster.
Just one more question, another one. So, for example, troubleshooting. This is great. You know, you can troubleshoot the application running in the on the Kubernetes clusters. How about with any existing workload which is running on the Kubernetes clusters? Can you troubleshoot using the Cloud Code? Oh, yeah. Or it has to be built and deployed by the.
No. I mean, oh, yes, you want to debug an application that was deployed without scaffold. No, you cannot do that for now. What you could do is you could take the same application, same Docker images, and the same YAML files, and you could just write the scaffold.yaml to deploy that on a test cluster, for example. And it's very easy, and Cloud Code has a UI to help you write such scaffold YAML configuration. In fact, it's just a UI, and you say, OK, these are the YAML files I want to deploy. These are the images I want to deploy. And boom, you've got a scaffold YAML, and you can debug those applications.
Good, thank you.
Hello. 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 Hi, nice presentation. Thank you. I got a question about the templates and the code toolkit that you are presenting. Is it possible to add your own templates? So basically the commands, Docker files, and stuff like that.
So in terms of the code snippets or the entire project template?
Entire projects. Like I would like to control the YAML files or extend yours. I would like to control the templates for the snippets and stuff like that.
You know, that's not something that we offer this time, but the good news is I'm the product manager, so I can tell you that's on our backlog. It's
so I will prepare this more detailed specification and send it to you. Yeah,
so actually, as I mentioned earlier, please go to GitHub and search for Cloud Code for VS Code and Intellij. There's 2 different repos there. You can go on either one, and you can make feature requests on our public issue trackers. And I look at those every day.
OK, thank you.
Thank you. Maybe time for one more question.
Do you have support for Helm, or are you going to support Helm?
Yes, we do support Helm today. There's varying degrees of support for Helm. You can have a Helm application, and some elements of it will work, but we don't automatically generate the scaffold files today that will work with Helm, so there might be some manual work required on your part. That is something that we're looking at doing very soon to make that work automatically. If
you want to go into more details, so the tool that's used underneath Cloud Code is called Scaffold. As we said, it's a CLI. And this CLI supports multiple ways to deploy Kubernetes applications. So kubectl, or Kustomize, or Helm. So if you use the Scaffold CLI, you will be able to deploy with your Helm templates. But right now, it's not surfaced into the Cloud Code UI. Thank you very much. Thank you, Russel.
Thank you, everyone.